Talk about risk. I mean, at what? Because you have in the book you have 3 questions to evaluate. Like an investment risk. What's the downside? What's the upside? Can you live with the downside? How should everyone here think about stupid risk, intelligent risk, or however you would describe risk? Because I mean, we get paid, I think, relative to what we are willing to take on, relative to the risk, which could be misconstrued as let's make crazy ass, judgments.
Good. Risk doesn't cease to exist just because you ignore it. One of the smartest investors in the world today, who Warren Buffett stops what he's doing to read what this man has to say. This is the only guy that Warren says, when Howard Marks talks, I listen. Howard Marks has written a book. You should own this book and you should read it soon. Probably after you read The Road Less Stupid. But then again, I'm biased. If my kids asked me to which one they should read first, I'd point them to Howard Marks. So read Howard Marks first. Howard Marks runs a company called Oak Tree Financial, and he's written a book called The Most Important Thing. The Most Important Thing. He says a lot of brilliant things. 3 that I'm going to mention. Number 1, the less risk you perceive, the more risk there is, which is completely counterintuitive to the way most of us think. If I perceive that there's no risk of having an automobile accident between my home and the grocery store, then I won't put on my seatbelt. I'll text while I'm driving. I'll be talking on the phone and watching a video, and as a result of perceiving there's no risk skyrocketed. The way you lose money is by perceiving there's no risk. I'm a natural. I've got all this money. These are smart people. If it doesn't work out, I still got a lot more. I mean, what could go wrong? And so we begin to think in terms of, we say stupid stuff. Everybody in here has done it. I've done it. We say stupid stuff like, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. This is intergalactically stupid. This is unbelievably ignorant. The greater the risk, the greater the probability of a loss. But we say, oh yeah, I mean, it's risky. But, I mean, the reward, my God, the upside is so huge. We've done this. You and I were talking about this. Warren Buffett was playing golf. This is a true story. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are playing golf. They're best friends. And there's with 2 other guys. They get to a par 3, which is the only kind of hole you can legitimately make a hole-in-one on. They get to a par 3, and one of Warren's playing partners, right as Warren was about to hit his tee shot, the playing partner said, Warren, let's have a bet on this hole. Warren said, okay, what's the bet? The guy said, $2. I bet you $2 that you don't hit a hole-in-one. And Warren said, well, like, what if no, it's $20. I'll bet you $20. And Warren said, okay, $20. If I got to give you $20 if I don't hit a hole-in-one. And Warren said, if I do hit a hole-in-one, how much will you give me? The guy said, I'll give you $20,000, which is 1,000 to 1 odds. That's what that is. So if Warren loses, if Warren doesn't hit a hole-in-one, he has to give his playing partner $20, but If he does hit a hole in one, then his playing partner's got to give him $20,000. And Warren looked at this and said, no bet. And the guy said, why? Warren said, well, I mean, the odds of me hitting a hole in one are not 1,000 to 1, it's 10,000 to 1. If I stood up here and hit 10,000 golf balls, there might be one that goes in the hole. But if I only hit 1,000 golf balls, the likelihood of one going in the hole, never going to happen. So I'm not going to take the bet. And the guy looked at Warren and said, Warren, it's $20. Last year, you made $5.6 billion. It's $20. And Warren said, I know. Stupid in small things, stupid in big things. Write that down. Write that down. What's sabotaging us is the small things sometimes. So this idea of risk doesn't cease to exist, that the less risk we perceive, the more risk there is. Howard Marks, in his book, said, a house that can withstand a hurricane is indistinguishable from a house that cannot withstand a hurricane until after the hurricane. And what we want to be doing is building houses, financial empires that can withstand a hurricane. I mean, for crying out loud, if you know that the economy does this and nobody can predict it, I mean, you know, there's the soothsayers out there, somebody told me one time, the reason God made economists is to make astrologers look good, right? The whole idea that somebody can predict what's about to happen, I mean, they can smell, you know, but nobody knows how big or severe or anything like that. They just know it goes in cycles. And what I want to do as a business owner is build a world-class defense to go with my world-class offense. As CEOs, as leaders, as owners, what most of us have done is built world-class offenses. And so we're always going long. I'm probably the only one here that did this, but when I was a kid, the guys would get in the front, I'm talking about a kid, like 7, 8 years, 10 years old, and we'd be playing football and in the front yard, and there'd be a quarterback, and he'd draw on his hand. He'd say, all right, now you do this, and you do that, and everybody'd look at me and say, Keith, you go long, right? That means you just run, and we're just going to heave the ball down there. It's going to be a Hail Mary, and maybe we'll get lucky. And that's how oftentimes we run our businesses, is relying on hope and luck. My dad told me years ago, Keith, you can rely on the rabbit's foot if you want, but it didn't do much for the rabbit. And that's kind of true, right? You have to kind of think about, where am I relying on hope and luck as opposed to being thoughtful? And being thoughtful would say, is there something that could go wrong? And asking that question and building a defense so that you can live to survive another day, which I didn't do when I was 40, right, which is why I lost all that money. Yep. Right? It was all offense. Plus it was arrogant. Plus it was hubris. I had an exhaust pipe in my mouth, and I was just inhaling my own fumes. Mm-hmm. I told somebody one time, I was 38 years old. I told somebody one time, I was being interviewed, and they said, Keith, how would you describe yourself? And I said, this shows you how screwed up I was, okay? I'm not proud to say this. I said, I'm a little bit like Halley's Comet. A guy like me only comes around about once every 70 or 80 years. Mm. That's how good I am at business. And that was right before nose down into the dirt, right? All right, here's the final thought on risk. It's better to ensure survival under negative outcomes than it is to predict success under favorable ones.
Say that again.
it's better to ensure survival under negative outcomes than it is to predict success under favorable ones. And so this way of thinking, you mentioned it a second ago, the 3 questions. What's the upside? And we tend to be experts at the upside because we're optimistic and we can see the opportunity. What's the upside? What's the downside? Which we tend to not be that good at. We rarely ask that question, and if we do, we kind of minimize it. It's kind of like what most of us do with our competition. Most of us with our competition minimize our, yeah, I got some competition, but nobody's really doing it. I mean, I'm different. I mean, I've got, that is about the craziest thing. Let me ask you a question. I'm opening another tab. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. How much money could you charge for your product or service if you had no competition? How many customers would you have if you had no competition? I already know your answers. If you had no competition, you could charge whatever you wanted and you'd have all the customers. So what dictates your revenue is your competition. And how you position and message against your competition. I think that the same thing is true with risk, the downside. How do I need to think about the downside and be realistic with it? And if the downside happened, then can I live with it? And one of the most powerful tools I've found in this is called a pre-mortem. A pre-mortem. You know what a post-mortem is. A post-mortem is, you know, somebody dies, they crack them open, they look around, say, how'd they die? Well, their heart stopped, they stopped breathing, blah, blah, blah. That's how they died. A pre-mortem says, I'm about to make a decision. I'm going to project myself 1 year into the future, and by projecting myself 1 year in the future, I'm going to look back over the course of the last year, and this decision I'm just about to make has turned into a dumpster fire. This thing is a train wreck. It is a mess. So 1 year into the future, I'm now thinking, as I'm looking back, it's a mess. A pre-mortem says, what are all the things that went wrong that caused this thing to turn out to be screwed up? If you will exercise this muscle, which is defense, on pre-mortems, on identifying and evaluating, minimizing risk, it's questioning assumptions, losing some of the optimism. My God, we're optimistic. We're irrationally optimistic about the initiatives and ideas that we have. And I think one of the best ways to play defense, honestly, is with what you're doing with this and some of the work I'm doing with the boards that we have, which gives business owners an opportunity to have people around them that will give them advice and tell them no. Yep. Yeah, ask yourself the question, how many people do you have right now, that can tell you no?
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
That will question your assumptions, that will push you back on some of the ideas. Most of us don't have people around us that will do that. In fact, the vast majority of business owners don't have that, and so it's why they say leadership is so lonely. And it is, because we don't have people around us that'll push. You look at the most successful businesses on the planet. Every one of them has a board, and every one of those boards meets once a quarter. There's a reason for that. That board is not there to inject the CEO with adrenaline. That board is there to say, whoa, cowboy, slow down just a little bit. Just a little bit. Let's think this thing through. What are the second order consequences? What could go wrong? Do we have a plan that ensures success, or at the very least ensures survival? Or are we going all in?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why having a sounding board, having a board of advisors is critical. I mean, in a lot of ways, that's how I look at Genius Network, because you can't see the label, you can't read the label when you're inside the jar, and having other people that will be able to, but they have to be smart, they have to be astute, they have to be well selected. And so let me do this, because I want to give a little bit of time for a Q&A for everyone. And by the way, we're going to be doing dinner here tonight. So in case anyone didn't hear that in the beginning when Mike mentioned it, we will be doing dinner tonight together. You have a whole process in the book to think through. I mean, there's so much, but thinking time. And I want to talk about thinking time and have you describe that process. Why is it so important? And it slows people down so that they can go faster and so that they can not build a machine for the problem that isn't, right? And there's so much knowledge and skills, especially in this room. I mean, everyone here has had a certain level of accomplishment because they wouldn't even be in this room if they hadn't. And at the same time, taking this knowledge and wisdom that's within them and being able to flesh it out by simply asking themselves the right questions and giving themselves the time to come to that is your thinking time process. So I'd love to have you describe that.
Great. So this will have some amount of strategic and a greater amount of tactical. Because the tactical is kind of important, because the tactical is what it allows it to become a ritual. So the key to thinking time is to start with a powerful question. The piece of paper that Joe passed out asks you to write down one of your problems, challenges, or opportunities. And what would have made that your response very successful would be if it was framed in the form of a question. So the instant a problem is framed as a statement, your brain will shut down. Because you've just said it's true, right? I'm poor, I'm single, my sales are inadequate. That's a statement. And what I want is a question, because the question is going to be the thing that opens everything up. And so the question might be, how might I so that I can? How might I increase revenues by 20%? And maybe I want to insert a guardrail right there. How might I increase revenues by 20% and on less than $1,000 a month budget? So I just put in a guardrail so that I can drop an incremental 10 grand in my bottom line every month. So the power is in the question. Albert Einstein was a professor at Princeton for 20 years. In his third semester of teaching, Albert's fellow professors came to him and said, "Dude, they're on to you." And Albert said, "What do you mean?" And his fellow professors said, "The students have stopped studying because you keep giving the same final exam questions every single semester. They're on to you. These are smart kids." They said, "You got to change it up. Otherwise, they all have passed around the test. They know what's coming." Albert said, "I'm not going to do it." And they said, "You got to be kidding me. Albert, you got to change the questions." He said, "Not going to do it." And they said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the answers keep on changing." I want you to think about that in the context of your business. In the context of your competition, in the context of the price of oil or who's in the White House or interest rates or alliances or networks that you have available, the answers keep on changing. And so what I need to get good at is figuring out the question. The saying I have is this: smart people have really good answers. Geniuses have really good questions. The key is, can I find the question that I need to ask before I start my thinking time? And the Road Less Stupid has got 704 questions that I've used, or variations on those themes, out of the thousands more that I've created. These are some of the best, these are the best 704 questions I got. I've been doing thinking time for 25 years, 28 years, and I do it 3 times a week. It lasts for 45 minutes. I turn off my machines. I'm not in front of a computer. I have a kitchen clock, a timer that I set for 45 minutes, so I'm not constantly picking up my phone or glancing at the clocks in my office. And I got a chair that I sit in, and the only time I sit in this chair is when I'm going to think. I got a Big Chief tablet, and I got a pen. And the only time I touch this pen, sit in this chair with this tablet, is when I'm about to think. I've pre-framed my thinking time with a question that I've developed that I need to ask myself that I'm going to think about. And the idea of thinking time is not to come up with the right answer. The idea of thinking time is to come up with a lot of answers. You know how to have a great idea? Do you know how to have a great idea? Have a lot of them and pick the best one. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to have a lot of ideas, and the thinking time process is all about, can I generate more ideas, more possibilities, more choices than what I have today? So here's a discipline. That's what thinking time is. It's a discipline that says, if I can sit quietly, if business is an intellectual sport, which it is, in my opinion, and if I'm going to be successful in solving problems or taking advantage of opportunities or identifying risk or figuring out what the obstacle is as opposed to the symptom, if I'm going to be successful in that, I need to stop reacting. I need to stop lurching. And what I need to start doing is thinking about, here's possibilities. And when I'm done with thinking time, the alarm goes off. When I think, it looks like this. So I'm in my chair. I get all settled in. I got to get my body really, really still, which my body is going to interfere with my thinking. So I always clear my throat. I take a sip of water. I do whatever I need to do, ooch my butt. I get very, very still. I've got my question or questions on my piece of paper. I start my timer, and I literally have my hand over my eyes so that I'm only looking down. If I look up, I get distracted. And I go into 45 minutes. And then the buzzer goes off, and then I look and say, okay, well, which one of these answers or which ones do I need to think more about? I've yet to have a thinking time. In 28 years, I've yet to have a thinking time that didn't add massive value.
What do successful entrepreneurs do to create sustainable, successful businesses versus entrepreneurs who fail that don't? So what's the difference between the ones that fail and the ones that succeed?
So my experience is that business is really, really complex. I think sometimes we make it harder than it is, but nevertheless, there's a lot of moving parts. One of the problems is you can do 99 things right and one thing wrong, and the whole thing be wrong.
Right.
My experience is that successful people tend to have 3 or 4, sustainably successful people tend to have 3 or 4 common characteristics. One is they're really good at what they do. They consistently execute on what they know. There is demand in the market for what they're doing. And there's a healthy dose of luck. Yeah. I think most people underestimate the importance of luck. I know lots of people that they're very smart. They work hard. They've got a good product or a good service. There's demand for it, but someplace along the line there was a miss. And sometimes that bad luck is self-inflicted. Yeah. And that can happen. You know, you can do the right thing at the wrong time and it turn out wrong. You can do the wrong thing at the right time and it turn out right. And so to some extent, there's some amount of luck. And I think anybody who's successful and doesn't acknowledge luck is arrogant beyond words. It is unbelievable how we sometimes minimize the importance of. Warren Buffett has said, you know, I'm really good at what I do. I really enjoy what I'm doing. There's huge demand for what I do. I've made a ton of money at what I do, and I'm probably the luckiest guy. Had I been born 50 years or 100 years earlier, or had I been born in a different country with different parents, this wouldn't have happened. Right. And so I think those are some common characteristics. And I'm going to quickly add, I do not believe in bathrobes. I do not believe that one size fits all. I do not believe in pithy little, do these three things and get success. Don't do these three things and avoid failure. I don't think it's that easy. One little thing can make all the difference. You can get the right apples for an apple pie and still have a crummy apple pie. Yeah. Right? And so I tend to look at it that way.
So so you've made literally hundreds of millions of dollars and you've lost the tune of that. I mean, and so there is, I mean, you've told
I would rather not talk about the loss.
Okay. what I
will, though.
Dig into with you, though, is in the pain of it all, that's where it seems that you've got getting yourself on, say, the road less stupid. You've made, admittedly, some very stupid, arrogant mistakes early on, and you, like what it did to you mentally and psychologically nearly crushed you. And you told the story how you overcame that, and it became one of the greatest things ever. I'd love to have you, like, how did you learn all of this? What did you need to do in order to get the business knowledge and wisdom that you have done an incredible job of condensing in this really amazing book?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you're right in the middle of this disaster. Dan and I were talking backstage when he was coming off and I was getting ready to come on, and I said, I have also had a divorce and a bankruptcy. I feel very fortunate on the sequencing of mine because my bankruptcy came about a year before my divorce. So that sequencing was really important. I would have hated to gotten divorced 5 years before I went bankrupt. Look, I was giving an interview. I don't know if I talked about this when we were together a few months ago or not. I was giving an interview in Ireland for a radio station that was trying to promote an event that was going to happen the next day in which I was going to be the speaker. And the radio interview host, right before I went live, during a commercial break, looked at me and said, look, I've read about you. I know who you are. I know your background. Is there anything you don't want me to talk about? And I said, yes. I said, don't ask me how it feels to lose $100 million. I can tell you, it feels horrible, right? I mean, so don't ask me about that. He said, no problem. We go live on the interview, and the first thing this guy says is, I'm sitting here with Keith Cunningham, the man that lost $100 million. He said, Keith, how does it feel to lose $100 million? And so I'm now stuck because I'm live. And I said, let me tell you how I view this. I view life like a university. And in university, there are courses, and courses have tuition. I just took a course in the University of Life, and the tuition was $100 million. First of all, there's very few people who get to take this course. I mean, it's kind of expensive. And so that's part one. Part two is the key is not how much it cost. The key is, did I get my money's worth? Did I take this course pass fail, where I went in to do the least I possibly could? Or did I take this course and I want to make an A++, because I never again want to have to take this course. It's far too expensive. I think a key is, for me, Joe, and I see this over and over again in my own life and other people's lives, is the mistakes or the failures are not nouns, they're verbs. They don't define who I am. The question is not, did I make a mistake? The question is, can I admit it? And did I learn something? I love what Buckminster Fuller said, who's one of my heroes. Bucky said, a mistake is not a sin unless it's not admitted. The only way it can be a problem is if I don't admit it and then learn from it. And so in the book, The Road Less Stupid, I have a chapter on the log of lessons learned. And those are lessons that I had to learn the hard way. And part of what I do, part of what you do, part of what Dan does, what all the teachers, what all the mentors in this room are doing is they're allowing other people to stand on their shoulders. I'm standing on someone's shoulders, you're standing on, that's the exercise you just did. And it's very powerful. Who is the first domino? Whose shoulders are you standing on? And the idea is there a way for other people to learn from my mistakes? And if I can do that, I will have had a successful life.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
So you're the highest rated, I think now the only speaker at Business Mastery, Tony Robbins' big Business Mastery event, correct? Or does he have other?
We've been told that people like us.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. You're definitely the highest rated speaker at Business Mastery, and you read a lot. You're a voracious reader, and you see a lot of people dispensing advice out in the world through books that people, business owners, entrepreneurs, follow that you disagree with. And so I'm going to ask you, which will sound kind of like a silly question. Especially since you said, I don't believe in bathrobes. When people ask you, what's the secret to business success, what would you say to that? Because people always want to know what's the secret. And from a marketing term, I know it works. If I said, here's 3 rules I want everyone to write down, or if I said, here's 3 secrets I want everyone to write down, everyone would literally get out their pen when you say the word secrets. So people are pursuing it, and I think what you do such a great job in The Road Less Stupid of is dismantling so many myths and so much bullshit that exists, that people are being taught about business. And you're a guy that actually has made a lot of money and is very good with it and has gone through it. So when someone says, what's the secret? What is the thing? They're always looking for the easy way to do it. How would you respond to that?
So I think the first thing I would say is there are no secrets. There's just stuff you haven't learned yet. there's not a secret. There's no magic pill. There's no little formula that's locked away in a vault someplace that says, oh, guy, if you can just learn this one little thing, this is, and nobody else can learn it because it is a secret. I think that promotes the wrong kind of work ethic. I think it promotes the wrong kind of execution. I think that's the magic pill, tooth fairy, financial tooth fairy kind of mentality, and I strongly disagree with that mentality. I do think there are some things that successful business people do. I think successful business people, some of them make a little list. It's not intended to be all-inclusive. It's intended to maybe spark a conversation or a thought. I think successful people have extreme clarity about where they are, the reality of their current situation, which is point A, and they have clarity about point B. They have clarity about what they want, where they're going. And my experience is that most business people and most business advisors orient towards the second one. It's all about getting clarity on what you want, which I'm in favor of, but I think the only reason Google Maps works is because you tell Google Maps where you want to go and it knows where you are. And if Google Maps didn't know where you were and you told it where you wanted to go, the likelihood of you getting from where you are to where you want to go rounds to zero. Right. So the idea is, where are you, what do you want, and what's the obstacle or the problem that's in the way? I think the hardest work I do in my thinking time is what's the problem? Not the symptom, what's the core root obstacle? Because if I'm going to get from where I am to what I want, there's something that's blocking, and I need to know what that is. I need some clarity around that, because if I don't have clarity on the obstacle, I have zero probability of building a machine that will help me solve the problem, and building the machine requires allocation of resources. So there's a bunch of things in this little sequence I just said. There's clarity about where I am, clarity about what I want, clarity about the obstacle that's in the way, some thinking about what's the machine, which is priorities. So priorities, I think successful people are really good at identifying the correct priorities and then allocating the resources to execute on those priorities. I'll say it this way, I'm going to put it on a bumper sticker. A shift in priorities without a simultaneous shift in allocation of resources is wishful thinking. And wishful thinking is at the root of every failed business. They thought the idea was if they could just get clear on what they want, that somehow what they want would manifest. And I'm going to quickly say I totally agree with Dan and what he just talked about. I think getting clarity about what it is you want is important, but I think because that allows you to filter. But I also think somebody's got to pick up the business end of the shovel and consistently execute. Right. I'm not a believer in the magic pill. So,
can I say something? Because this is an interesting point. Because Dan says as entrepreneurs, just their creativity, make it up and make it real. Now the making it up part and making it real, all kinds of shit goes squirrely, right, along the way. And what you're saying with the execution, and even like the impact filter, which is a thinking process in order to get clear on the importance, selling yourself on it. What's the success criteria, and piecing it together. Think of the amount of suffering of these idealistic, aspirational desires that are missing all of the roles, the key elements, and the priorities done in a certain way that actually achieve something, which is why there's so much business success. And I think what you're doing here is getting people to slow down enough with thinking time so they're not so reckless as they're trying to drive, because so many entrepreneurs are they're driven, but their drivenness is driving them in the walls. It's driving them into poor health. It's driving them into insanity, and a tremendous amount of driving off cliffs all the time.
I think that's it. I think this need for speed, I think this need for significance, I think this need for, my friend Alex Mandossian, who's someplace in here, has said it very eloquently. Few things are worse than running the wrong direction enthusiastically.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think we tend to substitute passion and what we're excited about. I will tell you, whatever your passion is, it's either something you think you can be successful at or you are successful at.
Yeah.
Now, the instant it becomes unsuccessful, your passion goes to zero and you start looking for the next cool thing. Mm-hmm. So the passion is not, it's just excitement about what I think I could be successful at or what I am successful at. But if you sucked at it, I promise it would no longer be your passion. So I tend to gravitate. I'm probably, and there's a great example right now in the press. This guy, Sun, I don't know how to say his first name, Marushi Sun, who is the guy who put together the $100 billion fund that invested in Uber and WeWork and a dog walking service, and has blown through $100 billion in 2 years. In 2 years. And it's probably gone. The bulk of it is. And I contrast him with somebody like a Warren Buffett, he's been at it 60, 70 years and has built something that has withstood the test of time. And I compare that to what other people are doing, and it seems like there's a lot of people that are optimizing for a one hit, and it may turn out good, but I'm not sure if it's sustainable because there's a lack of business skills and tools. I'll say it this way. Business success requires business skills and tools, much like ping pong success requires ping pong skills and tools. And if you want to win a gold medal at ping pong, somebody better have ping pong skills and tools. And the same thing is true with business. If you want a gold medal in business, somebody better have some business skills and tools and bring more to the table than simply an excitement about the idea. Somebody's got to execute something. And most failures have to do with either we haven't identified the problem, we're excited about something but don't know what to go do, we've built a crappy team or a team of munchkins, a team of people that are C players, and that can sabotage. There's so many ingredients, and just being thoughtful about what's really required and what's really the problem, I think, is the key to saying, how do I keep this thing going?
Yeah.
The environment's always changing. The environment is the only thing, that's the only thing that's always changing. So a good idea today could be a bad idea tomorrow, and vice versa. So I think one of our jobs as business owners is to be thoughtful about, good, how are things changing? Either the competition, the economy, the White House, Brexit, North Korea, interest rates, price of oil, the competition, consumers. I'm changing. And so what I can do today is vastly different than what I could do 25 years ago.
How should business owners be thinking about this crisis in terms of risk and opportunities?
Okay, so I'll share with you 5 or 6 really cool distinctions that I've talked about a little bit, so people might have heard it in some other forums, but they're really unique perspectives on what I'll call mental arbitrage. So the first thing is, I mean, this is very, very trite, but I think in terms of dyads and triplets. So dyads mean I want to divide and conquer. So there's 2 types of attitudes. There's reactive, defensive, readiness, and then there's proactive, strategic, ethical, opportunistic preparedness. So let's assume that everybody we're talking to is in the latter, not the former. So what I look at are opportunities, correlations, implications, anomalies nobody else is perceiving. So I think I'll go through this very quick, what I'll call 5-part distillation. Number 1, I don't think there will ever be another window of opportunity. By the way, if I look up, I'm just accessing my thinking. I'm not trying to be rude to anybody. I don't think there will ever be another window of opportunity as wide, deep, and receptive as there is right now for doing collaborations, joint ventures, strategic alliances, endorsements, co-branding, referrals, of the most wide magnitude. And you can take me deep on anything you want. And I'm not talking about, and no disrespect, a typical affiliate deal. I'm talking about much richer, deeper, much more involved and sustainable. Number 2, there's never going to be as many companies that have been as ill prepared financially and are going to be against the ropes and in dire probability of either having to very barely make it or go broke, and there'll never be as big an opportunity to acquire, not businesses. You don't need the yoke of liability, but the assets, the buyers, the prospects, the distribution channel, the URL, the phone numbers, any key personnel. Number 3, and this is really interesting, is that there now are, I think, 22 million people unemployed. If you look at it, Joe, it's polarized top and bottom. There's a large number, pardon me, 1 second. There's a large number of unskilled people, which for this discussion are irrelevant, but they're very relevant human beings, men and women, fathers, mothers, husbands, etc. But on the upper end, they're super skilled. And why that's important is these are people that had hard-won, very deep relationships with key decision makers for their very, very recently previous employer for very significant things. If you can identify them on LinkedIn, which you can because I've already done this for clients and we've done tests that validated it, and you can prove that your company, your product service is superior if they do not have a non-compete or if it's not a competitive product, they will never, because these people are making 2, 3, 4, 500,000 more, and now they're sitting hoping to get unemployment, which couldn't come close to paying their car payments. So if you can contact them, persuade them that your company, product, service is warrantable, they have all these relationships that they can feed to you, and they'll never be receptive any other time in their life to doing something on a performance. And if they do well, they can earn themselves a career opportunity. Finally, and there's one more after this finally, but finally in these categories, there's 1.5 million or so salespeople that can't sell something. You can recruit them right now to do any of the 3 things I just talked about or anything else imaginable on a pure performance, and that'll never be available to you in that way again. Finally, there's something that I call options trading, but it's not options trading like stocks. It's getting control of assets and access. I got a lot more things, but these are the 5 big ones. For example, if you came to me and said, Jay, I got this great idea. I want to do a J. Abraham advisory letter. You don't do one, and I'll take it out, and I'll give you a fee when I start of X, and I'll give you so much percentage, and I'll give you a piece of the back end. You can literally take that right and flip it to somebody in the advisory business for a bigger amount and a bigger override. And there's all kinds of stuff like that, Joe. And that's the kind of things that I sort of function on, which are a little different than most people. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that helps. And by the way, how you're looking at me right now, if you could gaze into the eyes of everyone through their screen the rest of the time, I think there'd be a much deeper.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Pardon me.
No, I'm sort of messing with you, but then.
That's okay. No, I tend to be a little bit, not intentionally distanced. I was just trying to remember what I wanted to talk about. I'll be deeply focusing on the camera. Okay.
That's perfect. So like you've spoken in front of, what's the largest audience that you have ever spoken in front of?
I don't know, 15,000.
15,000? Okay. I'm just trying to check, like on an arrogance level, how arrogant do you think you are? Just because, so many people all over the world think you're like just this amazing genius.
I don't think I'm arrogant as an ego. I think I'm arrogant about the concepts.
Yeah.
I think it's a different, I think I'm misperceived. I really do.
I've known Jay for like, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And he's mellowed. He's, he wants to be arrogant even about his ideas. And he's a pussycat.
No, actually I've gotten to know Jay very well. I think he's a really incredibly kind, cool, awesome guy. So yeah.
I just want to add one like specific, like when Jay was talking about his number one, where you've got, the companies like a chiropractor, for example, who has an office and he can't take patients, or he can if he wanted to go one patient at a time, and he wanted to fumigate the office, and he wanted to, he could get away with it. But while he's doing that, slowly but surely, what Jay is, one of the things that I was thinking about, because it was a chiropractor in my group that you coached, Jay, and he wants to drop ship supplements for their pain. So he can't crack their back today. He can crack their back maybe a few months from now. So he free visit 3 months from now, but he drop ship supplements, pain supplements, or even more. There are companies like with lasers and all this kind of stuff that don't know what to do. I mean, they can sell stuff online, but if they can partner with a guy like this, who's got the network, who's got the funnel, so to speak, of all of what he's doing, I mean, partnerships are I agree with you 100%, Jay. This is the best time to buy as opposed to make everything. And you get to test all these different things that you might not go into those businesses anyway. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's great, Brian. Thank you. And I like your beard. You look very distinguished. Joe, if you think about it, very interesting that everyone needs money and people are rudderless and they're trying to figure it out. I mean, there's a real sleeper that people don't think about. All these restaurants that are on the ropes that are closed, the independent ones, not the chains, but the independent ones have very rich, deep relationships with their clientele. And the more upscale have much more sophisticated clientele. They are great influencers you could contact to introduce all kinds of different products or services. And that's just a singular idea. And I mean, I want to be very supportive, and I want to bring to your audience as much as I possibly can. I was thinking about something, if you'll let me, that I would love to share about distinguishing between a superficial partnership and something very deep. And I can tell a couple stories when you want, if you want, and if not, I will shut my mouth.
No, do it right now, because there are so many people that are viewed as influencers, as experts, that present themselves as actually having deep relationships with people when it's just a manipulative setup sort of game. So I'd love for have you make the distinction between superficial
Well, so let me start by telling you how we used to do what you would call an affiliate before the advent. And again, I go back, everybody knows that, Brian knows that, to when there were a lot of newsletters that were physical. But when we would set up a deal, and the one that I'll use as a reference is I had a very large gold brokerage company when the newsletter business was very high. And most people would just try to get the editor, the personality, to recommend them in a letter or a little blurb in the newsletter. I did not do that. The first thing I did was set us up as the recommended provider. And every time anyone ever became a new subscriber, they got in their new subscriber welcome package a collection of materials we created all about hard assets, all about gold, silver, the case for it, and even the case against it, so it was balanced. Number two, 4 times a year, we underwrote the cost of special edition newsletters that basically focused on hard assets. The Outlook had epic, iconic people. Sorry, I'm looking up again. Forgive me. People that would write, and they were really cool. Third is we funded quarterly regional events where we would bring an icon, we would bring the editor, we paid for everything, and then we would bring our person. Fifth is a lot of people back then would keep mailing, Brian knows this, until they hit break even. And break even would be 2 different things. For some, it was imputing fulfillment, which wasn't that much, $10 a year for a $200, $300, $500 newsletter. Sometimes it wasn't. When they stopped, we would take over funding it because we got joint tenancy of all the names. I would change the headline, the bonuses, the risk reversal, make it a little tighter. And we would basically turn it into viable and make money on it, but we'd get joint tenancy of the name. When it stopped working, because most newsletter promotions then, I think Brian would affirm, and maybe today too, they were based on the bonuses. And we were in the gold business, which was lead generating, and lead generating would cost us sometimes $150 a lead before it was a deferred investment we wouldn't recoup for a month or two. So we would use the mailing piece for the newsletter stripped down to just the bonus just to get leads at a lower cost. But we basically, it was sort of like the concept, the integrative concept of becoming an integral part of the relationship. But that didn't happen until we won very, very deeply the trust of the partner, and that we protected them on everything. And I was very good, and I think I still am pretty good at preemptively thinking through all the negatives, all the concerns, not just overcoming them, but blatantly bringing them up to show that we have already protected them. I can go on, but that's just one example.
Michael Middleton sent me a private question, and I said, you know what, why don't you just bring this up and ask Jay directly? So Michael, if you want to unmute yourself and ask that question, let's do it.
And when he does it, I have 3 or 4 points that I think would be fun to share sometime if you'll let me before I am thrown off, okay?
Okay. So
Thanks,
Michael.
Joe. Jay, you just mentioned something about restaurants which struck a chord with me, but I've been struggling to think about how to use this. But some of the high-end restaurants in London have been sending out to their mail lists recipes and that kind of thing, but then also linking out their food suppliers, because the wholesale food suppliers, their businesses,
Same thing here.
All the hotels and restaurants. So in the world that some of the rest of us are in, I'm struggling to think of situations where I've maybe got clients or business connections where I could use the same kind of thing, where we can help them in this way.
Michael, can I ask a clarifying to make sure I hear? Are we talking about restaurants, or are you just using restaurants as a springboard to some other industry application?
Just as a springboard. I'm not in the restaurant business. I have a financial planning business and a retirement coaching business.
Okay. And so your clients are whom?
My clients are corporates companies with sort of 4,000 employees and more. Many of whom they've sort of furloughing staff, or they're looking at redundancies. They've got people that they're going to be taking on to early retirement. It's a new business. We had a face-to-face workshop program which just got shot to bits.
And Michael and Joe, I forgot. I'm embarrassed. I forgot a big part of the first element that I've been talking about, and that is whatever you do now, you want to identify what else people buy before, during, after, and instead, and I can go into instead, and you want to be able to make those product services available to them also. Then you want to go to the next level, Michael, and think about this, and think about what else they are buying decision makers for that the trust you create would be appropriate to introduce them to. And a lot of people are very vertical. They only think in terms of whatever they do and the transactional activity that they deal with. But if you think about the fact that that person in normal times is buying or influencing certain things, but in abnormal times they're even new things, and most of them are indiscriminate. They don't know who to choose. They don't know who to go with. They don't know who to really pick as a choice or a provider. If you are in a position, you've earned their trust. That trust now can basically, it can what's the word? Not crescendo. It can basically expand out to a multitude of different ways you can very ethically monetize. And then there's two different ways to monetize, now and in the future. If you know that it's only a matter of time before certain types of products or services will be paid for, you can set them up now. Most everyone on this call is going to need money, unless they're doing fabulous, which some are. They're going to need money worse in 6 days, or it's going to be in 60 days than they do right now.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps or I gave you a headache.
No, it helps a lot. Hopefully I can read my writing.
With the restaurants, anybody here who might have a whole influence sort of chain to restaurateurs, I think you could go to a lot of them and introduce them to all kinds of qualitative people that their upper level type clientele would be very receptive to. And you have to realize one of the greatest, and you guys know this because I've watched some of the discussion with people that are doing the virtual events, you're never going to have also the high level decision makers captive in one place for such a period of time where they are able, when you engage them, to be very focused. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting sort of adversity produces enormously unique opportunity if you understand how to first of all identify it and then seize it.
Today, I'm going to share with you 5 ways my dad lived his life that can help you live an even better one. The first way my dad lived his life is my dad would hustle. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and we lived on a busy street with lots of cars cruising by. And my parents, years before, had planted this big hedge to drown out some of the noise from the cars. And my dad would get the idea to trim the hedge every few months, but he wouldn't tell me and my brother. He would just wake us up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday after, as teenagers, we were out a little too late the night before. And he'd come down the hall banging on the bedroom doors. "Let's go, troops, everybody up. Let's go, we're trimming the hedge today." My brother and I would stumble out in the front yard, weary-eyed, ready for the all-day endeavor of trimming the hedge. You have to picture this. To trim the hedge, my dad would wear Bermuda shorts, a white tank top undershirt, white tube socks with red, white, and blue stripes pulled up to his knees, and a red, white, and blue headband. And all day he'd stand out there on the ladder trimming the hedge with all these cars flying by. And my brother Tom and I knew on Monday it was going to be awful because we're going to get all this grief from our friends about how dad was dressed working on the hedge. I don't know if you ever had a mom or a dad who embarrassed you, but it was pretty embarrassing for us. But my dad hustled, whether it was trimming the hedge or taking care of his patients in his medical practice, he hustled. And I learned that from my dad. I hustled my way to playing college basketball at 5'9". I hustled my way to build our business with Mimi over the last 22 years. Can you hustle a little bit more in parts of your life? The second way my dad lived his life is he took care of his team. So as Timothy mentioned, he was in the South Pacific in a combat zone during World War II. He went over as an X-ray technician. He worked his way up to the rank of sergeant, and he ended up scrubbing in on the meatball surgeries, helping save the lives of the soldiers over there in the South Pacific. One high-ranking surgeon, a lieutenant colonel, actually took a liking to my dad, so he would have my dad scrub in on all his surgeries. The war ended, and even though the war ended, there were still a lot of surgeries because of booby traps and skirmishes with the Japanese, because a lot of the Japanese didn't know the war was over. They didn't have smartphones in those days. So there were still a lot of surgeries, and my dad was doing that. Well, his unit decided to throw a party. So they sent a private off to get alcohol. And unfortunately, when the captain called the unit together and asked my dad, all present and accounted for, the private wasn't back. My dad knew what would happen to that private, if he told the truth, so he fibbed. And he said, yes, sir. Well, the captain figured out that my dad had not told the truth. And this was a by-the-book military man. So even though the war was over, he decided to court-martial my dad. The next day, my dad's scrubbing into surgery with a lieutenant colonel. He said, sir, this may be the last day I scrub in with you. And the lieutenant colonel said, what are you talking about? He said, well, the captain is court-martialing me. The lieutenant colonel screams across the medical tent, bring me the phone. And they come over with a crank phone. Get me the captain on the horn. They get the captain on the horn, hand the phone to the lieutenant colonel. Lieutenant colonel says, what is this I hear about you trying to court-martial Sergeant Dew? Cut it out. I need him in surgery, damn it. And slammed down the phone. And that was the end of the attempted court-martial of my dad. But whether it was in World War II or in his medical practice, my dad always took care of his team. And now in our wealth planning business, we're up to 10 on our team. And Mimi and I both know we have to take care of our team. Can you take a little bit better care of your team? The third way my dad lived his life is he was disciplined. So when he retired, he got really into health and fitness. And just to give you an example, his cardiovascular routine was 3 days a week for exactly 32 minutes in an exact heart zone. He would have 1 glass of red wine a night, not 1 1/4, not 1 1/2, never 2, always exactly 1. My dad lived with discipline. And I learned that from my dad. I work out 6 days a week and I almost never miss. Could you use a little bit more discipline in your life?
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
The fourth thing my dad did in living his life is my dad was careful with money. So when I was 16, I had the privilege of driving the family's 1972 Chevy Impala. And it was brown and it was ugly. It was an old beater, but I was grateful to have it. Our cars sat out in the sun because we didn't have a garage. We didn't have a carport. And after a while, the sun cracked the dashboard on the Impala in many places. So my dad took it down to the dealership to get a quote. My dad did not like the quote from the dealership. 2 weeks later, he comes into the house, very excited, and he says to me, I fixed the Impala. I said, what do you mean, Dad? You fixed the Impala? Yeah, the dashboard. I fixed the dashboard in the Impala. That always scared us because my dad was not good at fixing things. So quickly, I ran out to the car to see what had happened. And sure enough, my dad had fixed the dashboard on the Chevy Impala. What he did is he went down to the carpet store, bought a piece of shag carpet, and he super glued it on the dashboard. What my dad didn't know is when I was going to high school in Tucson, Arizona in the 1980s, there were a lot of Hispanic and Latino kids would create these lowriders. So they would take cars like Chevy Impalas, drop them low, they'd hang dice in the rearview mirror, and they would put carpet glued on the dashboard. So I got harassed all the time in high school for trying to be a lowrider, even though I didn't look like a lowrider. So that was a lot of grief my dad brought on with me. But my dad was careful with money. And I learned that from my dad. So every December, Mimi and I ask ourselves a simple question. How much more are we going to save and invest in the coming year than we did in the last year? And that one question has made all the difference. Could you be a little bit more careful with your money? And the fifth way my dad lived his life is he was the best at what he did. About 12 years ago, Mimi and I were at a memorial for a friend who unfortunately had passed away. And I bumped into an old friend of mine, Larry Seal. And Larry said, you have to come meet my mom because your dad was my pediatrician and he was my brother's pediatrician. So he walks me over to his mother and he says to his mom, Mom, this is Jim, Dr. Dew's son. She gives me this huge bear hug and she holds me for what seems like 2 minutes. She lets me go and she has tears in her eyes. And she looks deep into my eyes and she says to me, your father saved my son's life. And I said, this goofball Larry? And she said, no, my other son. It turns out my dad had diagnosed something that was very rare and very hard to diagnose. And he caught it very early. And that saved her son's life. And as I think about my dad's legacy and all the kids he saved and the kids those kids had and the kids those kids are going to have, it's hard to measure the impact he's had on the world. When I think about my dad, I think about being the best financial advisor I can be, being the best husband I can be. Can you be a little bit better at some of the things that you do? So my dad's 5 life lessons. Number 1, hustle. Number 2, take care of your team. Number 3, live with discipline. Number 4, be careful with money. And number 5, be the best at what you do. Isaac Newton said, if I've seen further than others, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And I'm thankful and I'm grateful that I get to stand on my dad's shoulders. And in some small way, after my talk today, maybe you can stand on his shoulders too. If you lost someone you loved, just think of this. They're always with you in your heart and in your head when you think of them. And I think of my dad a lot. I love you, Dad.
Well, let me take you back to 1997. I had just joined EO, the Entrepreneur Organization. I failed out of high school. I talked my way into college, only to then drop out of college. 14 schools, the only diploma I ended up with was kindergarten, true story. And what did I learn? I learned that I love to learn, but not in school. So I approached the Entrepreneur Organization. You needed $1 million in revenue to get in. Bingo, I'm there after 8 years of slow growth. I'm now joining this organization of great, smart people that have shared passions of growth. But what I started to do, I made my first mistake entering into that group, is I started comparing myself to others. I started to look around and say, business is way bigger than 1-800-GOT-JUNK, more glamorous than garbage removal. And I just thought, who am I? No high school education, not a lot of money, maybe not a lot of brains. I was stuck. And I really started to go in a bit of a doom loop, downward spiral. And I questioned what I wanted to do and how I could even get there. So September 17th, 1997, I go to my parents' little cottage on the water. I pull out a sheet of paper and I sit down. You know, it was a dock similar to this stage. I sat down on the edge and I said, Brian, you're an optimistic person. Stop thinking of this doom loop. Think of pure possibility. What could the future look like, feel like, and act like if only I could imagine it? So I took out the sheet of paper and I feverishly wrote. It was a Jerry Maguire type moment. We will be in the top 30 metros in North America by the end of 2003. I said we'd be the FedEx to junk removal, clean, shiny trucks, friendly uniformed drivers. We'd even be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I took the sheet of paper and I was out of my doom loop. I had chills and shivers of just going, wow, I can actually see the picture that was in my brain now down in writing. I started to share it with others. 2 interesting things happened. Number 1, it separated people into 2 camps. I had employees who said, Brian, I don't know what kind of hope dope you're smoking, but good luck with that. And they left. I had another half that said, this is really compelling. I love your story. I love what you see, and I want to be a part of it. And those people stayed and became a part of it. It became the most powerful recruiting tool I could ever create. How did we do? Top 30 metros. We were 90 days out from making it happen when one employee comes up to me and said, Brian, we're at 28 of 30 metros. We're missing Pittsburgh and Milwaukee. Cameron and I went screaming through the office, posters up everywhere. Who do you know in Pittsburgh? Who do you know in Milwaukee? We made the top 30 happen. We made Oprah happen. We made 96% of what was in that painted picture happen.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
Now, why? Science would say that it's your reticular activating system. We all know when we're in an airport, we're stressed, we're about to miss a plane, we hear our name over the loudspeaker, you pay attention. Your mind pays attention, as Dan Sullivan says, your eyes and your ears focus on what your brain needs to know. A painted picture tells people what is important. Not just the entrepreneur, but what do you want every person in your company to be aligned around? When they're faced with tough decisions, what are they zoning in on? What's their North Star? So we made these things happen. The company started to grow. Cameron and I set a $100 million painted picture, and we looked another 5 years out together. And what was interesting about that time was we had to make decisions moving quickly. We needed to know that everybody was aligned. Now, with Cameron, I remember he would say, Brian's the vision guy. He came up with the 100 million. I'm the executor. I'm just going to reverse engineer and make all the magic happen. Sort of true, but I think Cameron did not give himself credit at the time. He knew a lot more about vision and how to make it happen than he let on. So I said, Cameron, you say you can't think about vision. You can. If you could go anywhere in the world right now, money's not an object, where would you go? I don't remember his response, but he said it out quickly. He told me what the beach looked like, who was with him, the cold Corona in his hand. He described everything about that dream vacation. And I said, see, you just need someone to ask you questions, and vision can happen. One of the most grateful gifts that I think Cameron ever gave to me and to my companies is the ability to ask probing questions. In creating a painted picture, you just need someone to pull it out from within you. It's already in your heart, it's in your mind. What do you want? So let me take you from business to a personal story. Get vulnerable here for a second. I don't normally share this with big crowds. But I was with the same woman for 19 years, high school sweetheart. I questioned myself in and out of that relationship a few times. 10 years later, we get married. We have a baby together. I was a total jerk, and I leave the marriage right after having a baby. It was the right decision at the time for me. I was a total jerk. But my life started to fall apart in many ways, and it started to affect my business. Until Dan, one of my entrepreneur buddies, said to me, you know, you got a great painted picture for your business. I bet you don't have one for your personal life. What are you going to do about it? So I retreated and started writing one out for my personal life. And I know that you share painted pictures with your loved ones and those around you. So I remember after I wrote it, I shared it with Cameron. Here's my vision. And one line stood out to him. It was about my ex-wife saying that we will always be best friends and cheerleaders in each other's courts. Cameron said, Lisa hates you. She will always hate you. There's no way this will ever happen. And I said, well, it's in my vision. I believe, I see it. I'm going to work my butt off to make it happen. And sure enough, I did. Proof of that is when I went dating and looking for my next marriage, my last marriage, I got out there and I was tired of dating, so I started to write down everything I was looking for: personality, interests, height, eye color, everything. And I get a phone call from my ex-wife, Lisa. We're now great friends and cheerleaders in each other's courts, and she says, so Brian, I know you've been looking for someone. I found her. I said, my ex-wife is not going to set me up on a blind date. I'm sorry. She pushed me for a year. We went on the blind date. I actually looked at my list the night after my blind date and went, holy crap, that is magic. So painted picture, I ended up getting introduced from my ex-wife to my new wife, couldn't be happier, found my soulmate, life's all great and works like magic. Let me give you one last example to conclude on a business side. We were 2012. Cameron was out of the company at this point in time. We had a great growth trajectory together, but then the financial meltdown happened, 08, 09. I had a failed COO I brought in. That didn't work out, and things were rough. My franchise partners lost faith in me, and it was 2012. We did a conference in Vegas. Brought everyone together, about 600 people, and Cameron and I had this concept, lean into the future. It's leaning into 5 years ahead to see what things look like, feel like, act like, and creating a painted picture. So as a leader, I had to go out and create the next painted picture when people didn't believe about growth. So I said, we will double our business in 5 years' time. And I'll read you something I wrote that I read out as I walked. You're just checking in on Facebook. Where is it? Okay. So I walk out on stage. To get people to lean into the future with me, I carried a surfboard, full size. I was dressed in total surfer gear. We had Hawaiian music playing. We greeted everyone at the door in leis. People had Mai Tais. Hawaiian shirts was mandatory to get in. And I read this. I got everybody to close their eyes, but you don't have to do this. I said, you are sitting by the beach, 12 feet from the shore, watching the sunset on the horizon. You feel the warm, inviting Hawaiian breeze. You hear the sounds of celebration all around you, music, shared laughter, the clinking of glasses. Surrounded by some of your closest friends and family, you pause to reflect on the pride you're feeling. In every entrepreneur's journey, there is a dream of what is possible, a vision of what success looks like. You have achieved yours. You have doubled your business, and the journey isn't over. I then read our 2016 painted picture calling for another double. And what happened? People told me after Mai Tais at the end of that night, they didn't really see it. They said, it's great that you got all the Hawaiian theme, Brian, and you spent some money there, but I don't see it. I said, you will. And we read it together as a company every quarter until we made it happen. How did we finish? $224 million in revenue at the end of that year. We were in Hawaii, and when I was on stage, I turned around and I said, holy crap, we are 12 feet from the shore. I can hear clinking of glasses. I had nothing to do with organizing the event, but everything I had read out and envisioned had come true. So I think when Joe asked us all, do we think we've got the power to change the world? We can all change the world with one small idea planted in your mind, put in paper as a painted picture, spreads, and magic happens.
Let me ask you about that, because I mean, you know, for everything I know about you, you're a very generous, giving guy, and of course you have to make hard business decisions and stuff because you have I mean, of course, depending on how detailed you want to get, you have a million things that you could attend to. What was it about how you approached him that you believe caused him to give you that time? Because there's certainly some people that are opportunists, but they approach someone in a way that doesn't engender them wanting to help them. It actually makes them want to run away. Do you know what that is about you?
Yeah, so I know that both on how I approached him and then how others have approached me, good and bad. And so when I approached Fred, I was just, wow, really impressed with what you've built in a sincere way, and wasn't trying to flatter him or manipulate. I just was really, wow, I couldn't believe I got to meet him. And I said, I've got some questions and I'd really love to run them by you. And I think he could tell that I was sincere and that I had real questions, and he maybe saw a little bit of himself in me or something, or a little bit of me in him when he was a kid, and it seemed to work. And so people reach out to me all the time, and I always try and say yes to someone who sends me an email as long as it feels real and there isn't a hidden agenda. And nothing's more frustrating than when you get on a phone call and you find that right away it was just to pitch you on something.
Yeah.
But if somebody really wants help and needs help, I think entrepreneurs, it's just like an unwritten rule to help those that need help in the same space, because we all got help.
Yeah, and we know how hard it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I say hard, let me reframe that, or at least talk about hard, because I said this funny thing. I even mentioned it yesterday when I was doing another interview, where I said it at an event once. I said, if I would have known how difficult it would have been to be successful, I would have stuck with being a loser, right? Because there's a lot of work involved in it.
Right.
And I say in a funny way. And look, I love my business. I love my life. There's definitely difficulties and challenges. And,
of course.
Now is a better time than I've ever had. But man, there are some days, weeks, years that were just hard. I mean, just gut-wrenching, difficult. And, there's, because your book is called Willing to Fail, you have a frame of how you think about this stuff. So do you enjoy hard, or how do you think about the term hard? Because we hear a lot of people advising, work hard, do a lot of hard work, and and there's this work smart, not work hard. In a lot of ways, it's work hard on smart things. I mean, that's, but not all the time. Because you can totally burn out too, and you've probably, I'm sure you've hit burnout stages.
Of course.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear you talk about what hard means to you and how you operate within it.
Yeah, I love what I do, so many times it doesn't feel hard. Even when things go wrong, it's still like, oh, cool, we got a challenge to overcome here.
Yeah.
And you want things to go as planned. You want your sales targets to happen. Let me tell you a story about how I think I would define hard. So putting together the book with Roy Williams, we're sitting down and I was trying to come up with the title. I just felt like that's the starting point of a book. What's the title?
Right.
He said, no. We're going to put together the manuscript. We're going to close the book. The title will pop out. And I said, Roy, I'm a branding guy. Wow One Day Painting, Shack Shine, 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Like, I start with brands.
Right.
He said, it doesn't work like that in books. So he said, we'll close it off, and I promise you the title will jump out. So after rereading the book, the title jumped out, WTF, Willing to Fail, because I realized it was failure, learn, succeed, failure, learn, succeed, fail. And so reframing for me, those failures aren't hard. Those failures are gifts. I mean, on Christmas, doesn't everyone love opening presents? I'm like, I got another gift here. And while some people might go, yeah, it's easy to say you've built a $400+ million business. No, I've always felt that way. I've always felt that There is a gift in every failure. I just need to recognize and learn what could be better that will come from that failure as a result of that learning. And so the number one thing I'll do, and yes, I'm human. Yes, I get days where I'm depressed and I'm in bed for 3 days and don't know what to do because of a failure. But when I'm ready, I take out a sheet of paper and I write down what's the one thing better than where I am now that can come from this seeming failure. And I'll write stuff down and I commit to just writing one thing. Sometimes it's 10 things, but I've never been let down. Every failure has led me to a better place.
Yeah. You're either winning or you're learning, and if you know how to learn from the failures, then you still win ultimately. If it doesn't,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, have you've met more entrepreneurs I can imagine than anyone on the planet. Have you ever met an entrepreneur that hasn't failed over and over and over?
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen. I mean,
Have you ever met an athlete that hasn't failed over? Like,
Yeah.
it's life.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what's interesting about failure? There's some celebration of failure that I think gets improperly celebrated, meaning no one likes to fail, no one wants to fail, and I think getting up and saying, hey, we're just going to go at it and we're going to fail, there's a lot of people that just screw that up. There's other people that just know it's just part of the process, in the same way that if you're going to go through a difficult workout, you're going to exert effort, and failure on the path of success is just part of the path of success, and it's the road, it's part of the road. What's the difference between being willing to fail versus being reckless or unprepared or having just a terrible, undoable business model, and someone's enthusiasm is far, more exhibited than any form of intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm saying be willing to fail, it's not being reckless. So let me give an analogy for a second that's real life. One of my daughters, 4 years ago, she comes out of ski school. We're all a family of skiers. And she comes out of ski school. She's like, I hate this. It's not for me. This sucks. And I go, why don't you like it? She goes, because I keep falling and it hurts. And I said, no, you don't understand. Falling is how you get better. You fall, you reflect on why you fell and what you'll do differently, and then you get better. No one becomes a great skier by not falling. So the next day she goes to ski school. She comes back. She goes, guess what? I fell today. And big smile on her face. And I was like, that's awesome. A, because it taught me that like my wisdom actually sunk, but B, that she understood that that's a process.
Yeah.
And so I think people just have to recognize it's as much of a part of success as getting anything right. In fact, it's probably a bigger part.
Yeah.
In life, we watch sports and we celebrate, the NBA championships. But if you think of this year, our team, the Toronto Raptors, gets there, it was all the mistakes that led up to it that I hope those players remembered and celebrated in their minds. When I look back, when we hit our goals, the stories that stand out that we talk about over and over weren't the like, wow, this was easy.
Right.
It was the pain, it was the trauma, it was the, oh my gosh, do you remember when we didn't have this?
Yeah.
And that makes life sweet.
Totally. And when I sit and ask entrepreneurs to think of the greatest breakthroughs they've had, 99% of the time, those things came out of pain. It's turning shit into fertilizer. I mean, it's taking something that's adverse and being able to transform it.
Yeah. And when you're in that fertilizer, in the shit, you don't understand necessarily that something great is going to come from that.
Yeah.
But you have to be open to that possibility and have a little bit of faith. And I don't mean that in a religious type way, but just have some trust that, you know what, that is going to bring you to a better place.
Yeah.
Just allow it and be okay with that. Yeah. And, I think when you talk to entrepreneurs and, even if I think of my own breakthroughs, I don't think I was aware of the breakthrough the day that bad thing happened.
Right.
It was time that went by where I started to reflect and think, oh, you know what? It was that moment that taught me this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
I got to ask you just to share a couple of business strategies. I mean, you've accomplished so much in life. So business strategies, life strategies, some elegant ideas that really have allowed you to have great success. If you could share a couple.
Well, I really believe in win-win. Don't try to grab everything. Make sure that whoever you're negotiating with lives happy. And that has really stood me very well. And also, just make the right decision for your company, even though it may not mean as much money as you might get somewhere else. I mean, for me, I knew that when AOL, when Tim Armstrong, the CEO of AOL, came to me and said they wanted to buy the Huffington Post, I knew it was right.
Right.
I know that my co-founder, other investors wanted to wait and do an IPO, and maybe we would have made more money, but I knew that the Huffington Post had to keep growing. And in order to keep growing, we needed to invest more resources. And in order to invest in video, in mobile, in global, all the stuff we've done became possible because of this acquisition. So beyond the money that we made from the acquisition, it was the right thing for the Huffington Post. Mm-hmm. So I think as business leaders, we need to make these decisions. And if you start something, I mean, you care for it like a child.
Right.
And so I wanted it to thrive. I wanted the Huffington Post to thrive. And I knew that these were the circumstances in which it would thrive.
Yeah. So you know what I love, I have a friend named Dan Sullivan who founded a company called Strategic Coach, and he talks about in order to have the conditions that you want in your life, you need to set things up in a certain way. And what I think is so great about Thrive is you talk about there are a lot of people that are very smart when it comes to getting power and getting money and building big companies, and they know how to set up things in order to have those conditions. And what you've written about in Thrive is how to actually set up your life to be happy, to be fulfilled, to not self-destruct, to actually, I mean, even the chapter where you talk about so much about death, I mean, even the studying to death,
yes.
You share the insights from people that are around dying people all the time. I mean, it really makes you look at life in a completely different way. And what's great about the third metric is that you realize that the glasses that people are staring at success from are, they think they're seeing things clearly, but they're not seeing things clearly at all. And so if you only had a couple of minutes to summarize just the biggest benefits that you have gotten in your life as a result of adopting what you've now laid out as a way of living and thrive, what would you say that is?
Well, without any doubt, I'm more productive, more creative, happier, and more vital in the course of my life. And that's why I so much want people to try it. It's very simple little steps, and realize that we can achieve everything we want, but do it with less stress and more joy.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. Okay, I hope you found that video awesome and useful. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, I want you to click here. And if you want to watch some more videos that'll be useful and awesome, click here. Go ahead, you're over here. Do it now. Come on. Thank you. Watch them.